today's topic, and I'll open the meetup link to this because I was very careful about certain things. Even though I didn't write the blurb, I made sure some things are the way I prefer them. So one thing is I insist on calling this the anti-Israel movement. It's not a pro-Palestinian movement, and we can get into reasons why that is, including the question of whether there is such a thing as the Palestinian people, if that is an actual nation or not. But there is, if you look at the um, the type of activism that is supposedly pro-Palestinians, and much of the philosophy behind it, which we'll be discussing throughout this event, then I think it'll be clear that what these activists care about is uh, the side that they hate, not the side that they supposedly support. And I think one thing I often say is that if they really wanted the lives of people living in Gaza and in Judea and Samaria to be the best that it can possibly be, they would basically send them pictures of the Tel Aviv skyline throughout the decades, one picture from each decade in the 110 years or so that the city of Tel Aviv has existed, and say, copy that, build that instead of building tunnels into Israel where you can murder more Jews, or rockets, or whatever it is, whichever way they use. They're very innovative in that regard. So we will probably discuss Israel again in the meetup, maybe in the show, possibly in both, especially if the annexation issue, which will probably come up today as well, moves ahead. But this is again mostly about the anti-Israel movement. So, without further ado, Dr. Andrew Bernstein.
Thank you, Razi. I'm no expert on U.S. politics, much less Israeli politics and her enemies. So I'm going to make philosophic points here, set a philosophic context. And that is, this is objectivism 101, so there's nothing new for most people in the Ayn Rand, from the who sign up for the Ayn Rand Center. But you put it up on YouTube, it could certainly be new and important for people who aren't familiar with Ayn Rand. And as Ayn Rand showed us, brilliantly in Atlas Shrugged, that the human mind is the source of all values. This is mankind's survival instrument. This is the source of all the values that human life depend on. And of course, related to that, the human mind requires political economic freedom. It requires the principle of individual rights, in order for human beings to flourish. And Israel is a relatively free society. Are there many free societies in the world today? But relatively free, and we see because of that the kind of advances that are made in Israel. The field of medical research is one example. I'm sure there are others. The Tel Aviv skyline, like Razi said, the way it's built up, Israel has built up. The way the Israelis converted a desert into fertile agricultural lands. When the mind is free, and it wouldn't matter what ethnic group it is. These are largely Jews, but it could be any Christian denomination, or Muslims, or Hindus, or Buddhists, or whatever. Where the mind is free, where you have a principle of individual rights in a society, the most creative minds, the most entrepreneurial minds, the most brilliant minds are free to function without fear of suppression from either the religious or the secular authorities. And we see, Israel is one example of that. And it's a good point about the Palestinians. For anybody who legitimately cares about, Palestinian lives matter, right? For anybody who legitimately cares about Palestinian lives, the best thing that could be done for the Palestinians is not, to have them go live in Syria or Iraq or Saudi Arabia, or one of these repressive Arab Islamic countries. The best thing would be to convince the Palestinians Israel has a moral right to exist. I don't oppose it. I don't want to fight against Israel. I don't want to destroy Israel. Rather, I want to live in Israel peacefully, like so many of the Israeli Arabs do, and partake of life in a basically free country. That's the best thing that the Palestinians could do for themselves. and the best thing that anybody who legitimately cares about Palestinian lives could do would encourage them to support Israel's right to exist and mean it. Now, we look at, just briefly on this, on Israel's enemies in the West. The largest part of it comes from a basically Marxist philosophy. And I think, unfortunately, I make a dire prediction here. I think we're going to, we're starting to see a slow growth of the Nazi mentality, which has been quiescent in the West for a long time now, at least in the United States. But we're starting to see a slow growth of that. I think that's going to accelerate as as the Marxists, as exemplified by organizations like Black Lives Matter, Antifa, and their shills in the media and the Democratic Party and corporations and everything become more and more culturally influential. We're going to see the rise of the so-called alt-right with basically Nazi mentality. Now, from the Marxist communist standpoint, of course, they see the world always not in terms of individuals but in terms of groups. It was the rich versus the poor. They see the world in terms of economic classes. Of course, they promote class war, rich versus the poor, the oppressor versus the oppressed, and this is their worldview. And then they claim to stand for the oppressed. Now, of course, it's all a canard. If they actually stood for the oppressed, they support capitalism, individual rights and capitalism, which one politically stops oppressing people and supports promotes their freedom, and two, having promoted their freedom, it promotes their prosperity. They don't care. It's really interesting. I don't think there's enough written on how Marxism, communism, of its very essence, is a philosophy that's drooling with envy. It's just riddled with envy. Hate the rich, eat the rich, kill the rich. Destroy the most successful people. Now, in aristocratic regimes or totalitarian states, people become wealthy and successful as blood-sucking parasites. So it's understandable you might dislike that or want to kill them. But in a relatively free society, overwhelmingly, it's the most talented, intelligent, hardworking people with real initiative who work their way to the top. And want to kill the rich it's an envy-ridden philosophy of wanting to kill the most successful, hardworking people. It's filled with hatred, of good people, of successful people. And Marxism ultimately then is, as an envy-ridden, destructive philosophy, is nihilistic. And it's really becoming clear in the United States now, as with the so-called Black Lives Matter movement. That's a sham. These guys are terrorists. BLM, Antifa. They don't care about Black lives. That's a whole other discussion. But the goal here is to destroy. The goal is to destroy America. There's not even like a fig leaf anymore, or we want to create the workers' paradise. No, the goal is to destroy the United States. That's the ultimate goal. It's completely nihilistic. And that's what Israel's enemies are. Israel is the United States of the Middle East. It's the one relatively free country. It's the one by far the most, because it's relatively free, it's the most prosperous. The joke that goes around, name the one country in the Middle East where Muslims have rights. Well, the answer is Israel, right? And the Israeli Arabs have lived in peace, not the Palestinians, but the Israeli Arabs who live in peace, with the Jews and with the Israeli government, and volunteer, right? They're not required to serve in the IDF, but sometimes, very often, volunteer to serve in the IDF. I remember visiting the IDF museum, and there was a whole wing of all these, Israeli Muslim heroes who had fought, in some cases died, to defend Israel. This is the country where Muslims have rights, and a number of Israeli Arabs and Israeli Muslims are flourishing. And this is why it's perfect Marxism. We hate the successful. We hate the rich. We hate people who are free and prosperous. And our goal ultimately is to destroy. A great example, I think it was in the Black Book of Communism, where I got this example from. But it was under Lenin, in the early days of the Soviet Union, fighting remorseless class war. They have a bunch of one part of Russia, I don't remember or some part of the Soviet Union, might not be Russia, but some part of the Soviet Union had all these middle class women, as prisoners. At first, they made them, the secret police, they made them clean the latrines, scrub the, these upper class radicals scrub the latrines. Then they raped them. Then they put a bullet in their head, and then they threw them in a mass grave. Now, it's just the horror of this. It's just you just see the hatred eaten, envy of the rich. This is just these women deserve that kind of fate? No, even if they were like mean-spirited employers to their employees, that's not the fate they deserve. This is hatred-eaten, envy-driven, destructive. Ultimately, it's destructiveness for its own sake. It's nihilistic, and this is the enemies of Israel. And they want to destroy it. They don't care about the Palestinians. They don't care about the lives of people in the Arab Islamic world. They hate Israel for its success, and they want to destroy it. And the Nazi mentality is a variation on that theme. I mean, why the Jews? Why is it always the Jews, right? Why? Well, Jewish culture emphasizes education and consequently, development of the mind. Not an accident. Probably Ayn Rand came out of that culture. And consequently, you see, Jews in relatively free countries who are, very often successful and affluent. The tragic irony, of course, for National Socialism, is that Germany was the most advanced country on the European continent that had been the one that promoted the freedom of the Jews, that permitted the Jews to leave the ghettos and actually become part of mainstream German culture and benefited from people like Mendelssohn and Heine and Einstein, and a lot of these, German Jewish, creative minds. But the envy-driven hatred, you see it in the Armenian genocide. We see it constantly. The desire to destruction for its own sake, and that's why I agree with this. Israel's enemies are evil. They're beyond evil. They're they're at the lowest rung of evil. They're nihilists. This is destructiveness for its own sake. We'll dance gleefully around the rubble of America and the rubble of Israel while we devolve into tribal savagery. Well, that's what we're dealing with. So I can go on, but I think that's enough.
Thanks, Andy. And yeah, I mean, one thing, as I was saying in my intro, that we need to pay attention to here, as with everything in especially in politics and culture nowadays, because of how flawed it is how language is used, how words are used, in this context. And you mentioned some of these movements, like, Black Lives Matter and Antifa. You speak out against them, and some people try harder, but some people will say, oh, so you're against Black lives, or, oh, are you pro-fascism? I mean, they're anti-fascist. It's literally in their name. By the way, try that argument with the same people about National Socialism, and it's not going to work. But certain things, are stated in certain ways, and then the argument is over. You call somebody a racist. That's it. You don't need the facts. The anti-Israel movement claims to be for freedom for Palestinians. I mean, their signs, most popular signs, other than the flag of the PLO, the terrorist organization that started this movement. Their most popular signs are "Free Palestine." Free Palestine. First of all, from whom? I guess Israel. But what would the result look like? And of course, the result, it depends. There are different factions within the Palestinian political movement. But the options, none of them are freedom. The options are Islamic totalitarianism, Arab nationalism, and oddly enough, straight up, Marxist communism, because, why not? By the way, in Israeli politics, the main party that claims to represent Arab Israeli citizens is it's three parties that joined forces into one list, because in Israel it's a proportional representation system. You need a certain percentage of the votes to pass a certain threshold just to get into parliament. That threshold was raised a few years ago. So these parties joined into what is called the joint list. It's three parties one of which is Arab nationalist, the other is communist, actual communist by their own admission, and the third is Islamic totalitarian. So it begs the question: these are supposedly very different ideologies. We know they're not, but what is it that unites them? And of course, what it is that unites them is hatred of Israel. And this unites also the international, supposedly pro-Palestinian movement. But other than calling for freeing Palestine from the river to the sea, by the way, is one when they have that chant in their protests, they tell you exactly what free Palestine would mean, right? It would mean wipe Israel off the map, replace it with Palestine. But they use language like human rights. They're supposedly they use as moral, as strongly a moral argument as possible. I mean, they speak about Israel being immoral, Israel violating the rights supposedly of the Palestinians. And besides the many questions that raises about why they prefer, if they are on the side of rights, why they would prefer the side that when it can violates rights, kills innocents, over the side that could do better but does protect rights more than any other country in the region. Why is it, if you care about rights, why is it specifically whatever Israel supposedly does that is your focal point around the world? Why is the world lacking rights violations? Or let's leave the rest of the world out of it. Is the region in which Israel exists lacking rights violations? And of course, it's not. So, yeah, this movement looks around the world, zeroes in on the worst area in the world, in terms of rights violations, and then targets that one country that is, I wouldn't say not as bad, I would say definitely better than all the countries around them. So this is something we should recognize with this movement. I mean, it is as pure evil as any political movement there is. Every individual within this movement can choose, just like any of us, uh, you know, anything to be interested in. If they're going to go into politics, any topic they want, the one thing that bothers them is the one country in the Middle East where individuals have some rights. As you mentioned, Andy, Arabs are definitely better off in Israel than they are anywhere else in the Middle East. Um, Materialists might say that if you're an Arab dictator, you're better off in some other places. But as an individual pursuing his own happiness, there's no better place in the Middle East, you know, Arab, Jew, or whatever, than Israel. Uh, one example of that the Arabs actually know this is people, Palestinians, so-called Palestinians in Gaza and the West Bank who are gay. uh, they flee to Israel and they get asylum in Israel, because in Israel they're not going to be, murdered on the street for having the wrong type of sexual orientation. Uh, I also can go on, but I will pass it to Andy since nobody else is raising their hand as of yet, or I'll pass it to Naomi.
The thing about, I listened to all of this and it doesn't resonate with me that deeply. I've been to lots of anti-Hezbollah marches and I've been, I think you're in the UK, aren't you, Razi? Yeah, so I've been down to London, I've been to the Labour movement meetings, I've sat in Liverpool listening to the Labour movement meetings and the grotesque hatred towards Jews in Israel, when Jeremy Corbyn was pushing for leadership. And it, what it came down to when I was doing all these online fighting, I don't think it had anything to do with Israel being successful or not successful. There was still that age-old anti-Semitic perception that the Jews are very powerful, run the world, have America backing it without any you know, without any restraint. But what was more concerning is, and what I think it comes down to, is this whole thing of Jews having actual right to exist anywhere. I think it's a very core attitude that they don't actually understand that they do or don't have it. I've even had black people being incredibly anti-Semitic towards me, like never trust a Jew, never trust a white Jew. And the real promised land is Addis Ababa or Shishimani and all these other places, and the Afrocentric. So, that came as a surprise as well. And I think that it's a core about, where does a Jew have a right to live? And I'm sorry for the American or people abroad, but Israel is the size of Wales or the size of Yorkshire, which is a very small landmass. And these settlements are probably not much bigger than, say, Finchley or Hendon, I would imagine. They come to what is probably a tiny little bit of land. But it's almost like, you're saying, where are you allowed to live? That's like, am I allowed to go and live anywhere in London or in any other part of Wales or Scotland or Ireland or anywhere? Where has a Jew got a right to live? And I think that comes before jealousy. It comes before success or failure. It's just the Jew being there, the Jew, the eternal Jew that still exists and keeps pervading through time as a constant reminder that there is no Messiah. He ain't coming back, because if the Jews are still there, they don't necessarily believe that this is coming again. And we're just, there is this old Bible and the new Bible didn't quite replace it. I think there's a few different concepts in there anyway. I'm done.
No, I hear what you're saying, Naomi. I think the answer, where does a Jew have a right to live, for about 100 years was the United States. Not anymore. I wouldn't recommend it anymore, because I think the United States is, I'm going to sound like Leonard Peikoff now, a very apocalyptic vision. I think the United States is will not recover. I think the country is doomed, and all this racial hatred will be directed against will certainly be directed against Jews. And white people more broadly, but certainly Jews. But anyway, the deeper point here is this. Jew hatred, I'm not an expert on this issue here, but Jew hatred, of course, originates in the modern world as the claim that Jews killed Jesus. I mean, obviously it was the Romans who nailed Jesus to the cross. And Jesus himself was a nice Jewish boy who made good, right? But this is where Jew hatred originates from. The Jews killed Jesus, and then it was all this, and the Jews killed Jesus, or at the very least they denied Jesus is the incarnation. So that was the basis for Christian anti-Semitism for a very long time. And the Jews were so oppressed, they weren't successful. So there was no reason to envy them. But in the modern world, in the modern Western world, I think the genesis of Jew hatred and anti-Semitism has morphed into a very envy in our day. I think it's a very envy-driven concept. The Jews are bloodsuckers. They're feeding, and even in the Middle Ages, where in Poland, Ukraine, Russia, the Jews are feeding off these good Christian peasants. I saw the same thing in the Ottoman Empire with the Armenians. The Armenians are sucking the blood off, because they were very similar to the Jews. Hardworking, industrious, successful. They were sucking the blood from these honest Islamic, Turks and everything. I think envy has become a big part of Jew hatred in the modern world, and certainly the anti-Israel element. I think it's driven by hatred of success. And Marxism, which is a mid-19th century development, it's almost still less than 200 years old, is a philosophy that simply institutionalizes envy. it's the philosophy. Oh, it's not funny. No reason for me to laugh. Marxism, communism. This is the philosophy of formed by the envious, who hate people who have achieved not only who have achieved success, but done it in relatively free countries where in the great preponderance of cases it had to be done by hard work and honest effort, and they hate uh, and they hate that. And the Jews have become poster children for that in the Western world. The freedom, and I give the United States a lot of credit here. A country obviously had slavery to start with. That's a huge problem. But the First Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, James Madison wrote, "Congress shall make no laws respecting an establishment of religion, or restricting the free exercise thereof." That was a charter of liberation for the Jews. The freedom, the anti-establishment clause, the lack of an official state religion meant that the Jews weren't going to be oppressed by the religious majority. And for 100 years, they flourished. I might write an essay one day that the establishment of the United States of America is the greatest thing that ever happened to the Jews in however many, almost 4,000 years. But the rise of Marxism and then the rise of National Socialism, both of them envy-riddled, kill the so-called exploiters, meaning the successful. So I think it's a big part of the Jew hatred in our day.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Naomi. Yeah, this is very much about Jew hatred, but that's not no type of racism is really a starting point. And yeah, when I say racism, by the way, I mean the people who hate Jews probably view Jews as a race, as do most Jews. I don't agree with that, but you know, I'd love to hear an explanation how my grandfather, who was born in Poland, and my cousin, who is adopted but whose biological parents are Jews from Ethiopia, how these two are the same race. But until I hear that explanation, I'm going to say they're not. But yeah, if you look at any type of racism, it's they always give an explanation. Nobody says, I'm just racist because, I hate these people for no reason. They'll always give, the anti-white racism that we see in America now comes with an explanation. The anti-black racism that, you heard in the past, and I think is coming back now as in many ways as a response to the anti-white racism. It comes with some explanation. The explanation is always wrong because there is no justification for racism, but it's not a starting point. The starting point is a deeper philosophical view of mankind, basically, and man's nature. There is, if you want to follow up, let me know or wave or something, and I'll unmute you. Otherwise, we'll go to the chat for the next question. All right. Fabian asks, isn't the complaint about being powerful basically about success, undeserved success, that is? And Athena asks, you're saying people in this movement think Israel, or should I say Jews, does not deserve their success? So if either of you want to follow up on that, you can raise your hand or do so in the chat. If Andy has something to say about that, you can go ahead. Yeah, Andy, go ahead.
Yeah, like I said, I think the starting point of Western anti-Israel animus comes from basically the Marxist left, and of course, you're right, Razi, and I think I mentioned it before as well. The Nazi left, National Socialism, which is a socialist collectivist manifestation, why I call it the left, the Marxist left, the Nazi left, is going to grow. I think it is growing. People like Richard Spencer, Jared Taylor, they're still marginalized amongst white Americans, but I think it's going to grow based on the anti-white hatred. So I think we're going to see the rise of anti-black racism, anti-Jew racism coming from the Nazi left. And I think the cry is always they're exploiters. The communist view is that the bourgeoisie exploit the workers, And the Nazi view was that the Jews, exploit the Aryans. It's always the claim of undeserved wealth, that they're exploiters, and the claim is false. In a relatively free country, the overwhelming majority of people who rise economically do so because of hard work, honest effort, talent, initiative, and these are, I say it over and over again, their enemies are envy-riddled mediocrities, and worse. They're nihilistic. They're not even thugs. Thugs. You see it with the riots in the United States. The thugs break into Best Buy and steal a TV or a computer, but burning down buildings, burning down black-owned homes, businesses, shooting innocent blacks, shooting black retired police chief. This is nihilistic savagery. They're going to destroy Israel. I mean, if they could, maybe one day they will. Hope not. They'll destroy the United States if they could. Hopefully they can't. And then they will dance gleefully amidst the destruction, and maybe they'll starve to death, a month down the road. But like James Taggart in Atlas Shrugged, their own fate is of secondary consequence to them. They want to kill you for being successful. Somebody, I think it was in Bulgaria, somebody told me this joke. I may be getting it wrong, but I think I got the essence of it. He said the devil appears to an American and a Bulgarian and says to him, "I'll give you anything you want on the understanding that your worst enemy is going to get doubled." Now I don't. Okay, so the American thinks about it and he says, "All right, well, I'll ask for $20 billion. Whatever the amount is. My worst enemy will have 40, but okay, I'll live with that because the 20 billion could do so much for me and for my family." So the Bulgarian thinks about it. He says, "Okay, my worst enemy gets double of anything I get." The devil says, "Yeah," and the Bulgarian says, "Well, then put out one of my eyes." That just sends a chill down my spine. He's willing to be half blind, and forego the enormous positive benefits that he might derive in this case, in order simply to heap destruction on somebody he hates for whatever reason. And that really captures the essence of who the nihilistic essence of Israel's enemies and America's enemies and the enemies of capitalism and freedom around the world. Just like James Taggart is a much deeper, characterization in Atlas Shrugged, illustrating this. Even if he starves to death within a month, he's going to do this anyway, because his goal here isn't to live; it's to destroy you. If you're a successful, happy person, the horror of that. I mean, I can't get my wits around it. I've been thinking about this since I was a teenager. And I read Atlas Shrugged for the first time, and at some intellectual level, I understand it. But emotionally, it's like, what? It's like, how could you become that degraded, that corrupt, that viciously evil? It says incomprehensible to me, but that's what Nazis and communists are like. Their actions indicate it, and the Islamic jihadists as well. The destructiveness is the ultimate goal. We need to understand that.
Yeah, it reminds me. I'll get to you next, Naomi. Actually, I'll get to SJ's question and then to you. But yeah, it reminds me of this imam, I guess, 15 years ago or so. There was this video, and this is one person, but I think it's shared by many, and who said basically to the West, "We love death more than you love life," and unfortunately, I'm thinking that's the case with many in the West. The love of life doesn't seem to be that strong. All right, I'll get to SJ in a minute. But Naomi mentioned Jeremy Corbyn, and I think Jeremy Corbyn actually brought it all together, sort of. I don't want to say integrated it all into one, proper Marxist anti-Semitic package. But if you look at Jeremy Corbyn's, much of his historical alliances came out when he was leader, and you could see, basically the criteria for, getting Jeremy Corbyn's friendship or support is you had to. I'm sure there's like an application form. You have to tick one of the boxes. You either have murdered Jews at some point, or have tried to murder Jews or have sponsored the murder of Jews. I mean, he was a regular contributor on Iranian national television. That's the Islamic Republic official channel, um, and it's a propaganda network of a dictatorship. It's not, we like to oppose, and rightfully so, public broadcasters in the West, but that's not the same. This is a different type of public broadcaster. And Jeremy Corbyn was happy to go on there, and once he questioned whether Israel has the right to exist on that network. So yeah, Jeremy Corbyn, I think, shows that it is in line with other bits of the ideology that rejects the right of an individual to his own life, that rejects the right to pursue your own happiness, to pursue success, certainly material success, and yeah. So the next question, I'm going to read it, and then I'm going to pass it to Andy, and then we'll go to Naomi. SJ asks, does objectivism consider support of a nation state with strong borders as moral, and thus inferring Israel's right to exist as well as England's? Thanks.
All right. Well, first, objectivism is a philosophy. So, I mean, it deals with with broad philosophic principles, and about the nature of the universe, the nature of human beings. How do human beings gain knowledge? What's morally right? What political system is best suited for human nature? We're talking about a topical issue here, so I think I don't mean to be annoying here, but I think just for the purpose of clarity. Can objectivist principles be applied to this question such that it's rational to support a nation state with strong borders, and on applied issues, people who share essential principles can disagree. I mean, disagree all the time, disagree about all kinds of things. Trump versus the Democrats, abortion, not abortion, and at what point in pregnancy should abortion be illegal? We disagree on interpretation of films, books, all kinds of things, even though we share fundamental principles. But you're asking me, so I think the answer to that question is yes. I mean, you have a free country. You want to be able to defend the free country. You want to be able to protect the individual rights of the members, of the citizens in the country. So I think you have borders. Was that the question about borders? Yeah, I think you have borders. You want to keep. I believe in open immigration with with one caveat. We got to keep criminals, murderers, jihadists, terrorists of all kinds. Want to keep the people who are physically dangerous, who are physically violent, and who threaten the lives of innocent citizens. Want to keep them out of the country. So we need to do background checks. Background checks are expensive, but immigrant productivity, I think, vastly outweighs that. But you want to keep bad guys out of the country. You got to have borders, yeah. And I don't think a wall is the way to keep bad guys out of the country, at least across the Mexican border for the United States. But yeah, you have a right to a free country, a right to defend it, or a right to defend your borders, and and do whatever it takes to keep the bad guys out. And I think the Chinese built that wall for a reason, didn't they? It wasn't just so Apollo astronauts could see it from the moon. The Great Wall of China was built to keep the Mongols out. And if you know the history of the Mongols, they had good reason to want to keep the Mongols. I'm talking about savages. My God. I mean, there's just guys who were off the charts. And China had a very advanced culture. The Mongolian culture was simply warfare. And the Mongolians didn't have the capacity to get over the wall or get around it or tunnel under it. So they turned west and destroyed the Islamic Empire instead of the Chinese empire. So you do whatever it takes to keep the bad guys out of the country. Now, a wall is a very medieval technology. Today, if you want to keep Mexican immigrants out of the United States, a wall's not going to, you can fly over the wall, you could tunnel under the wall, above wall, you could boat around the wall. Does Trump think he's going to build a wall across the Gulf of Mexico? But whatever it takes, that technology, that medieval technology was effective back in the day. You may need more advanced means to this day, but you have the moral right to defend the borders of a free country and keep bad guys out. So that's my take on it.
Yeah, I'll just add quickly. Yeah, I agree with Andy. Of course, there's no, objectivist position on this. I would say, it doesn't necessarily always have to be the case. If we had like 50 countries around each other, all, laissez-faire capitalists, borders don't have to be super strong, and the nation state, I don't think it's like an end in itself. But, let's start with one, and I suggest the UK.
Oh yeah, let's just add something real quick, Razi. When I was a kid, they used to, when the public schools weren't as virulently leftist and anti-American as they are today, they used to say proudly, they used to teach us proudly that the United States-Canadian border is the longest unguarded border in the world. It's like, I don't know, 2,500 miles, something. And the Canadians don't worry about American tanks rolling into their country, and the Americans don't worry about the Canadian military coming into our country. And you have two basically free countries and respect each other's borders. So yeah, with free countries, if you're contiguous with only free countries, that would be a great advantage to have. You wouldn't need to have an armed border to keep Nazis or communists out.
Yeah. By the way, I don't think anybody's worried about the Canadian military coming and taking them over. But
Neil, the Canadians didn't have to worry about the American military.
True.
My only question was that it was a concern to address to Andy. It was a concern that you said at the beginning, and I don't know if you're catastrophizing, but you said that you have an apocalyptic vision of what might be in America. I mean, I always felt that in America, if anything went strangely wrong, it would be the evangelical Christians who would all sort of suddenly want all the Jews out so that, we can get the Messiah in, and would be very happy to back Iran, and could quite easily become weirdly religiously fascistic and I don't know, I don't think I should write for Hollywood. But I'm asking you, what do you mean by apocalyptic, or are you being dramatic, or is this a real concern?
No, for me, I hate to say this because, I used to be known as the most optimistic, individual, in objectivism that, until very recently, I thought that objectivism would be able to save America as a free country and Western civilization more broadly. And I respectfully disagreed with Leonard Peikoff, who was, my teacher. I have great respect for Dr. Peikoff. He's the world's greatest living philosopher by far. He's been pessimistic for a very long time, for decades, and I respectfully disagree. But now, what I've seen in the last few years, I think the degradation is too deep. 63, it's not part of my nature to be so pessimistic. So I hate to even say this, but you speak the truth as you see it. And it's 63 years since the publication of Atlas Shrugged, and we barely made a dent. I read Atlas Shrugged when I was a teenager, and I would have been shocked if you had told me this is late 1960s, 52 years later, and this would be the state of the country, and objectivism had barely made a dent in America or around the world. I wouldn't have believed you. But so that's one point. But my fear, I know Dr. Peikoff still fears, the religious right, and the religionists as the main danger to American freedom. That's not my view, never has been. I respectfully disagree. I think the collectivists, the Nazis and communists, were basically secular, are vastly more dangerous. I think they're vastly more evil. I think, like I said 50 times already, I think they're nihilistic in a way that the religious lunatics are not. And I think they're the prime danger. They're the one, and I think the United States is moving towards a secular. And it's not just Marxism anymore, because the Marxist left, the communists, have incorporated National Socialist elements now. Now it used to be, the rich oppressing the poor. Well, now it's the rich whites are oppressing the poor blacks or the poor non-whites, and they've incorporated race war elements into their class war ideology. They've reversed the favored and disfavored races, but still, they're pushing the country towards race war, class war, civil war, and I'm afraid within 10, 20 years, the United States will devolve into civil war, could split the country into factions and into parts. I think it's coming overwhelmingly from the secular left, whether it's Marxist or National Socialist, not from the religious The evangelicals are, yeah, they're irrational, they're dangerous. They don't hate America, they're not nihilistic in the way that the leftists are, because they interpret America as a religious society, which is dangerous. They're the secondary evil. I don't think it's an accident that all of Ayn Rand's villains in her novels, were modernist collectivists, and not one was religious. There's hardly any religious characters, never mind villains, in her novels. And one reason for that is, in her day, the collectivists were the main enemy more than religion. But I think at a deeper philosophic level, I think collectivism is more evil, more nihilistic than religions. I think it always has been. I think its history shows that. And the last point I would make on this, I'm going to write a book on the nature of evil. And religion, I'm going to show, is the second worst evil. But collectivism is the worst. And collectivism is vastly more philosophical than religion. It has all of German philosophy behind it. Kant, Hegel, Marx. It has all of German philosophy behind it. It's philosophic in a way that religion could never hope to be. Respectfully disagree with Dr. Peikoff on this. And I think its philosophic depth makes it much more dangerous than faith-based beliefs of,
There was more murders, wasn't there, by communists and fascists than there was by any kind of religious war.
Oh, yes. But by conservative estimate, the communists, in the Black Book of Communism, the communists have murdered 100 million.
Yeah.
The past 100 years.
60 million.
It's probably a lot more. According to Rudolf Rommel, in his book, Death by Government, it's 60 million in the Soviet Union alone. And so it's probably well more. And then the National Socialists, probably 20 to 22 million, like 5.1 million Jews in the Holocaust, and then 15 to 16 million Slavic people, all kinds of innocent human beings. Now, the argument I've heard from objectivists that I respect is that, well, if the Christians, the Jews, the Muslims had the technology available to them, back then, that the collectivists have in the 20th century or 21st, they'd have done the same thing. I get that point. I don't think it's true. As one example, I mentioned the Mongols before. According to Matthew White, the historian, in his book Atrocities, the Mongols were responsible for murdering 40 million people, in the 13th century, 40 million, with, using swords as weapons of mass destruction. So it's not, weapon systems, and technology can make evil people more dangerous, but it's the ideology that makes them, fundamentally makes them dangerous. And the religionists, especially the Christians, they'll always give you a chance to, even the Muslims, they'll give you a chance to convert. You can convert to the one true faith and it'll spare your life, which is a head nod towards free will, which is an aspect of the mind. To the collectivists, if you're born into the wrong race or the wrong religion, or the wrong, the wrong economic class or the wrong race, there's no choice you can make. We're going to kill you, and kill you in the most brutal ways imaginable. The communists, in a certain way, I hate to say this, I know somebody's going to attack me for this, maybe not in this group. In a certain way, the Nazis were more merciful than the communists. And that is, they stick you in a gas chamber, and in a couple of minutes you're dead. That's horrible. But the communists' favorite technique of mass murder is deliberate starvation. It takes weeks. Can you imagine being a mother and having no food for your children and watching your children starve to death over a period of weeks? They did it. Stalin did it in Ukraine. Holodomor. Mao did it. It's just, you don't need technology to deliberately starve millions of people to death, which is the communists' favorite technique. Anyway, this stuff is horrible. I'm sorry, guys. It's so dark and negative. But this is the world we live in. It's similar to, I think it's coming similar to, we lived in the West in the 1930s, Hitler was in power in Germany, and Stalin in Russia, and Mussolini in Italy, and Europe was about to explode into warfare and civilization. This was a strong military alliance, especially when you throw in Imperial Japan as an ally. This is a strong military alliance that threatened civilized, certainly in Europe and maybe in North America as well. And we're living in days that are dark, and dangerous.
I'll just say briefly that the point where you disagree with Peikoff, and his conclusion is somewhat similar to Naomi's, is in this book, The Dim Hypothesis. By the way, the left in America today is different from what it was when this was written. Uh, Considering recent news, I don't know where Dr. Peikoff is, but some of you know him. Maybe you can ask him.
Well, he contributed to the Trump campaign
Yeah,
this year.
that's what I meant.
Yeah, that just came out. Betsy Spicer posted the invoice, last night. So I think I'm just guessing it because I don't want to put words in anybody's mouth, least of all, the world's greatest living philosopher. But I think Dr. Peikoff's view is probably still that the Republicans and the religious right are the gravest long-term danger, but the left, the left is so nihilistic that they're gonna destroy us now. They're gonna tear the country down now, and so they have to be opposed now to buy time. That the religion is a long-term danger. If we buy time from the nihilists, it gives us some time to fight against the religions. I think as recently as 2016 presidential election, that was Dr. Peikoff's view, and it maybe still is.
Yeah, yeah, Bob, it's from the official Federal Elections Commission website. So, but yeah, you're next. I'll also unmute you. But I will say somebody pointed out on Facebook that this contribution is from February. Bernie was still very much in it. It could have been, it could have been Trump over Bernie rather than over Biden. But yeah, Bob.
Well, number one, are you sure that it wasn't somebody posturing as him?
I don't know what the criteria is. I mean, when you give a political donation, don't you have to isn't that something they check?
No.
All right.
So I don't know the answer to your question, Bob, but I know there's some Trump supporting objectivists, passing around on the internet a mini speech that Dr. Peikoff gave 4 years ago was as to why he was going to vote Republican, and because he thought the Democrats, after eight years of Obama, he said he thought the Democrats were poised to destroy the country now, and he thought the Republicans might buy us time. And then in the long run, he made clear 4 years ago that he still thought religion and the Republicans were the graver threat to American freedom in the long run. But
Andy, wasn't that 8 years ago, though?
Yes.
He said 2016, so but I heard 2016. I think it was Leonard Peikoff himself saying it. He might have had the date wrong. I'm not sure, but yeah, okay. So, but I think his view today, again, I don't want to put words in his mouth, but a very rational conclusion might be the left is so dangerous right now. Even if I think religion is the grave or long-term danger, which I don't, but even if I did, I might just do anything it could to stop the left right now in order to buy the country some time. I mean, that's a rational. You can disagree with it, but I think that's a rational conclusion to come to about the nihilistic left and the imminence of the danger.
I'd like to shift back to try to be more optimistic.
Please do.
Consider how many thousand years were there of slavery. Consider where we are now. Consider the steps that it took to get there. Consider how many thousands of years women have been subjugated. Consider how many steps it took to get to where we are now. We're still subjugated in much of the world. Or consider all the acts against homosexuals and where we are now. So my point being is that changing a culture takes a long time. You should not be concerned that it's already 70 years since Atlas was published. That's nothing. That's a blink in history. So a further point is on the why hate Israel question. I think there's a spiral involved. Most of the people, of course, are just following others. So what you want to do is, what are the leaders gaining from this? That's where the issue starts. The followers, yeah, they'll make up all kinds of rationalizations. I had another thought that escapes me right now, so I'll yield the floor.
Well, what are the leaders getting out of it?
Well, that's the question. In the past, it's mostly been a scapegoat in order to blame for their own failings. So, we lost the war. Well, the Jews loaned us the money, so it's their fault. So we'll wipe them out. I think now it's more a matter of metaphysical envy, that the leaders, as you were both hitting at, or even explicitly saying earlier, there's a hatred of success, and the Israelis are obviously successful, and we, the Arabs, etc., and in particular all these all the phonies in the West are not successful, and we can't abide the existence of those successful people. Of course, that's the same thing that puts them against the top 1%.
Bob, you're absolutely right about how long it takes to change the culture. And the question is, do we have enough time? Do we have that kind of time? Because right now, it looks to me, and I hope things change. Sometimes it's good to be wrong, and I hope I'm wrong. I hope if there was a God, I hope to God I'm wrong about, the left pushing us towards race war, class war, civil war. But right now, with the anti, so George Floyd is horribly murdered, and then you get riots and Black Lives Matter here, who clearly don't care about Black lives, because if they did, they would start the discussion about the thugs in the cities that kill 90% of Black murder victims every year. But instead they're screaming about white racism, which is up until recently has been a dying force. You get burnings and the mass riots take over parts of cities. The authorities don't respond effectively to defend innocent lives and property. Businesses kowtow. The media, everybody kisses up to these BLM, Antifa, either thugs, terrorists, or just nihilistic destroyers. And there's almost no rational response from anybody who has any moral or political or legal authority. And it's just the rot in American culture is deep. And I don't know if there's time to. I hope there is. Hope I'm wrong about that. Hope you're right.
I thought of a couple more things. One is if you happen to be watching the mainstream media today, Fox and company were covering riots in Portland, Seattle, New York. And of course, CNN was covering the pandemic and whatever Trump's latest silly words were. I think if you pay too much attention to the conservatives, you will be misled in how much you believe the leftists are in control of what's going on. So my second point is I'm much opposed to BLM, the Black Lives Matter. And yet in South Carolina, the home of the Confederacy, in Aiken, our town, where we have a reenactment of the battle every year in February, where I'm not even sure if they admit that they lost that battle during that reenactment. Where as I drive down Richmond Avenue on my way to a car dealer, I see a Confederate flag with a couple of others posted on somebody's private property right near the highway. And yet, what Black Lives Matter did in Aiken, they held a litter pickup day. I don't see a smile from you, Andy.
So they didn't burn anything in Aiken. They just cleaned up the town. Well, that's a good sign. I think the leftists in the South tend to be less vicious and less destructive than in the North, or in the West. I know my year at Clemson. I thought, for my experience in Clemson, in South Carolina, I thought race relations in South Carolina looked a lot better than in New York. I think black and whites. This is 2013, 14. Black. I saw a lot of friends, a lot of mixed couples, just people getting along. I think there's race relations in South Carolina, and maybe in the South generally, are better than in the North. And I think a big part of that is because the leftists don't control the culture in the South in the same way they do in the North, and they're not pushing this white privilege, white racism, white supremacy, they're pushing this racial hatred like they do in the North and in the Western cities, the West Coast cities. So there's hope. That's a hopeful sign, Bob. Thank you, appreciate it.
Glad to raise your spirits.
Thank you. I may simply have to move back to South Carolina. I had a great year there, but Israel. Israel's surrounded by enemies, and so Israel's situation is dire and dependent largely on the United States. If the United States does go down, or just becomes a leftist state, led by people like Bernie Sanders or his ilk who hate Israel, then sort of being surrounded by enemies for Israel may spell the end.
Yeah, that's definitely one of my concerns about the left coming to power in the U.S. I have my concerns about the right, or so-called right, staying in power. But yeah, Israel, I'm worried for. But on the other hand, Israel, I saw this documentary about this PBS documentary, Netanyahu at War. I think it's from a few years ago, but it's relatively new on YouTube. And it made him, I don't know if intentionally, but I thought it made him look, better than what I think of him, mostly because he stood up to Obama. Because if Obama had had his way, Israel would be much, much worse off today. And Netanyahu stood up to him on a few things. And, people always say how Trump is so much better for Israel. And I agree. But Netanyahu isn't taking advantage of this. So I think Israel's weakness is something it has to deal with on its own. And that's also one of the two questions I really wanted to get to is the one from Athena. I'm curious if there's a legit idea opposing Israel's approach to self-defense, but not considered anti-Semitic. Can you give an example? Yes, I'll give my own criticism of Israel as an example of something that isn't anti-Semitic. Israel should fight back against its enemies. It doesn't. It does on occasion when there are rockets raining over it or soldiers kidnapped. It does some military action that sometimes kills some terrorists and some of the civilians that terrorists like to surround themselves with because it plays well on international media when there are dead children and women. And but Israel can destroy the main terrorist organizations in Gaza and in Judea and Samaria and Hezbollah in Lebanon, in an afternoon or an evening. It has the military power. It'll get some condemnations from some countries, but it can do that. It chooses not to. So I would say that's not within the legitimate role of government to say, all right, some of our civilians might die. We can prevent that, but we want to look good on CNN and BBC. So, let's not do that. Andy.
No, I agree. I think it's true of Israel. It's true of the United States. It's true of the West in general. You have it's a very different situation than say the run up and then the fighting in World War II. In World War II, the enemies were militarily powerful, and it's not inconceivable that they could have won the war or at least gotten a stalemate. So Hitler conquers Europe and forces the British to sign, even Churchill to sign, a peace treaty. Then there's no way to invade, France and everything. It's possible that they're powerful, but in the West. And Churchill, of course, exemplifies this in Britain. I mean, he was under no illusions as to who Hitler was, what the Nazis were. He was, and then he knew the British had to fight. Even the FDR in the United States, there was a great quote that my good friend John Lewis, the late great John Lewis, had from I think it was from FDR when he said it was, and I'm pretty sure about the war in the Pacific, but it may have included the fascist powers in Europe too. And he said, something like, I don't remember the exact quote verbatim, but so it's morally imperative that we defang the predatory animals of the world. Could you imagine some Western leader saying that today? He's talking about the fascist powers and/or imperial Japan. The point is, our enemies in the past might have been militarily powerful enough to defeat us, but morally we had the certainty in the past that we were in the right. These dictators and oppressive regimes were wrong, and we had every right to defend ourselves and to destroy them in self-defense. Well, today that situation is reversed. We have tremendous military power that vastly exceeds the Iranians or whoever's sponsoring jihadist terrorism against us. The United States, Britain, Israel could wipe out the Iranian regime in a day, maybe in an hour. But we've simply lacked the moral certainty. We lack the moral certainty that we had in 1940. The past 80 years have been enormously debilitating for Western moral self-confidence. And the reason, of course, again, is communism or Marxism, and that is that we defeated the Soviets in the Cold War, but Marxist philosophy has taken over the universities and the intellectual culture in the Western world. And we're the oppressor now. The successful, wealthy, free nations are the oppressor, and these are the victims. Whether it's the Islamic world or whatever, the victims of Western imperialism, defending themselves against us and fighting back. And we lack the moral certainty to defend ourselves against our enemies. So military power for the good guys to have is obviously a good thing, but vastly more important in defending ourselves is the moral certainty of our cause. That individual rights and political economic liberty is good. Any form of totalitarianism, religious or secular, communist or fascist, is evil, and we have every right to defend ourselves when we're under attack and destroy our enemies. Moral certainty in the face of attack is vastly more important than powerful weapon systems.
Yeah, and here at the Ayn Rand Center UK, we like to not just preach capitalism, but practice it as well. And we wouldn't be proper capitalists if we didn't have ads. So that last point you just mentioned, Andy, was also the point of the book by the man you mentioned, John David Lewis. I don't know if the quote is from that book, but this is the book for anybody who hasn't read it. Buy it. And the next question is, actually, I had something else there to add, but I don't remember what it was. So the next question is from Joseph. How do you see the future of Israel? From what I see, it seems to be growing. Yeah, it is growing. The problem is it's growing, while keeping its head deeply in the sand. It's surrounded by enemies that want to kill it, and that want to literally kill every Israeli, at least every Israeli Jew, and they're okay with some Israeli Arabs being collateral damage. But yeah, there were times in Israel, in my lifetime, when suicide bombings were happening every day in the major cities, and people were going out and having fun, and sometimes the next suicide bombing was at the club or restaurant or wherever they were going. And there were times when rockets were flying all over the country, falling everywhere, and people in certain parts of Israel pretend like that's not happening. That's not a good thing to do, I don't think. You should, acknowledge reality when reality involves, you wanting to build something and, being prepared to put in the work and everything, and around you, people doing their best to stop you, not just from building, but from living. That is something Israel, unfortunately, is resting on its laurels because it is stronger. It is militarily stronger. It can defeat, as I said, in an afternoon. It's at least its immediate surrounding enemies, and probably with a bit more effort, its major enemies like Iran. Uh, but it chooses not to. It chooses to you know to keep growing without doing the basic. I think without covering its basic security needs.
Also, it depends so much on the United States. If that pessimistic and apocalyptic view of American future, holds true, then it's going to very severely harm Israel. And and we discussed. I mean, just imagine if Bernie Sanders is maybe too old to win a 2024 presidential election, but some Bernie Sanders clone, whether it's Ocasio-Cortez or somebody like that, if that kind of person, that kind of leftist becomes president of the United States and the Democrats control Congress, let's say, and let's say Jeremy Corbyn becomes prime minister in Britain and has strong support in Parliament, with that kind of leftist control of major Western allies, especially the United States, Israel's gonna be hurt. And Israel's gonna that's gonna harm Israel's chances to survive it, severely.
Yeah, all the more reason for it to actually take action now when
Right.
it still can, without having its allies turn against it.
Right.
And yeah, I agree with you on that. And we will be talking about the U.S. election both at this meetup and on the Daily Objective, because it is a very difficult decision between two very, very bad options. And yeah, I agree with you. I think just if you look at Joe Biden himself, his voting record in the Senate, or his standing there record as vice president, he is not as bad as Trump. But definitely, if AOC controls the energy policy and Ilhan Omar controls the defense policy, that is worse than Trump. So yeah, you guys have a difficult decision. We'll be watching. And but yeah, you also mentioned Jeremy Corbyn. He's not going to be prime minister of the UK. But again, he got a third of the vote, which didn't get him anywhere near being prime minister, but is scary. He is a proper Marxist, and an anti-Semite, in as clearly as any leading politician. It's not like one or two or five examples. It's his entire career, and that didn't bother a third of voters. So that is scary stuff.
Sure is.
Do you want to add anything optimistic to sort of?
Optimistic. Yeah, because I'm hoping that Bob is right on this. And again, like as much as I respect Leonard Peikoff, he's been a pessimist for like 30 years. He's been gloom and doom. So let me close with something more optimistic. These free countries like the U.S. or the U.K. or Israel, they have a lot of resiliency. There's a lot of positive things, and it takes a lot. It takes a lot to bring down free countries like that. So in the United States, for example, which obviously where I live and what I know best, there's still freedom of speech. There's it's under attack from any number of people, but not from the you don't hear it so much from the government, which is the real danger. So freedom of speech means that you or I or any objectivist or anybody who defends capitalism we still have the right to speak out. I put posts up on social media all the time, and they haven't been suppressed. Mark Zuckerberg hasn't suppressed, his company hasn't suppressed me yet. So I hopefully doesn't. So I think freedom of speech is important. We can still wage the intellectual battle. There's still a chance. Secondly, something that I'm very heartened by is the rise of a Black conservative movement in the United States. I know you and I disagree on Candace Owens. I think she's generally terrific. But Candace Owens, Talib Starks, Larry Elder, because of this, some of these are old school libertarian conservatives, but there's new, younger ones, and I think that's who speak the truth, on this. I'm writing a review. This is Black Lives Matter. Talib Starks. I'm writing a review of the book for the Objective Standard. And Talib Starks is fearless. And he comes right out, says the real danger to Black lives, overwhelming danger, the thugs in the cities, the drug dealers. He calls them the urban terrorists. And the left. We discussed this recently with Dr. Briley, right? The left will just call me a racist for saying that. But what they say to Black conservatives or Republicans or libertarians, I mean, it's just they don't even repeat it. The insults are just vile. But Candace Owens, Talib Starks, Larry Elder, Sheriff David Clark, they're religious, they have their flaws, but these are morally strong people. They generally support America, capitalism, individual rights to some degree. This is very heartening to me to see, the rise of these, these really courageous Black thinkers to stand up against the leftist establishment that has done so much harm in the United States, especially the Black Americans. So there are good signs here, and again, freedom of speech, freedom of intellectual expression is the bottom line. As long as it's still there, and it's still in the U.S. Constitution, it's still protected, a protected right, we can wage the intellectual battle. If there's ever a constitutional amendment that bans freedom of speech, then there's no way to wage the intellectual battle, and no way to win. But that's not. I don't see that in the foreseeable future. So there's still a chance to win the intellectual fight, or at least slow down the movement towards dictatorship and buy us time. So I see Bob's point. There's some reason for optimism, and also let's remember, culture doesn't reduce to politics. There's a lot of cultural things in the free countries that are that are really good in business, and in Silicon Valley, for instance. We had that discussion at the Battle of Ideas. The Silicon Valley is still has a lot of real innovations. I love SpaceX. Elon Musk is a mixed case, but to me, he's largely a hero. We're going to be on Mars, in 30 years. I think there's a good chance. And there's still great things, going on in the free countries, and so there is reason to be inspired by heroes and continue the intellectual battle as long as freedom of speech continues to be upheld, and it is. There's not going to be in the U.S. It's not going to be curtailed anytime soon.
When you mentioned Battle of Ideas, is that when the Stalinist told you that the government should ban people from from building taxi apps and instead focus on health?
Yeah, that was what's her name?
Julia
daughter, Hobsbawm, Eric Hobsbawm's daughter. Was it Julia Hobsbawm?
Yeah.
Yeah, she was an out-and-out communist. Yeah. We were discussing Silicon Valley. Yeah, you were there.
Yeah, and I agree with you. Even though I disagree with conservatives, black, white, or whatever their skin color on a lot, it's definitely obvious that the left loves black people who toe the line that white academics have basically drawn out for them. And Stephanie mentions in the chat, the thing about saying there is still a chance is it reminds me of Dagny when she decided to leave Galt's. Well, Stephanie, the point was that we were going to end on an optimistic note, but Andy, now you have to bring it back.
Thanks, Stephanie. Yeah. Yeah.
You're unmuted. You look like you were saying something optimistic, so I'm unmuting you.
Oh. I don't have anything to say except that thanks a lot, Stephanie.
Andy.
Unfortunately, I get Stephanie's point. I'm moving in that direction from the extremely optimistic view I've held for the last 50 years. But I'm going to stand by what I said. Freedom of speech is important. When we go around the UK, when I've been there, Rossi, and we've gone around giving talks and everything, like with Jonathan Honig, I remember there were citizens, English citizens or British citizens in the audience who said we need in the UK, an amendment we need a principle like that as a legal document, that there's freedom of speech, so they can't put you in prison, for criticizing jihadists or things like that. Freedom of speech is important. Again, I give major propers to James Madison, who is the primary, almost exclusive author of the Bill of Rights, even though he was a slave owner. We always have to remember that. But the freedom of speech is important, and so there is still hope, in a country where freedom of speech is legally upheld, and will be fiercely defended if the government tries to suppress it. Be fiercely defended, at least as much as the right of honest people to own guns is fiercely defended. So there's hope as long as that principle is defended. Then yeah, there's still hope to win the intellectual battle. I get Stephanie's point, but there is still hope.
Yeah, and Andy, you mentioned your visits to the UK, which gave me, an optimistic note to end this on, because I remember December 2nd, 2017, I think that was the date of your talk in the University of Essex, organized by a brilliant young objectivist student there, with the Labor Society, basically the Labor Campus Club in the university, Labor Party, and this was the party led by Jeremy Corbyn at the time. And I remember I was talking to the president of that club, and she said to me that she thought Jeremy Corbyn was a moderate. Now, there were 70 people there, and they were asking good questions. They mostly, I think that the worst question came from a professor who told Andy, this thing has made my life worse, and Andy brilliantly said, then throw it in the Thames. But the students asked good questions, and and some of them stuck around, and it makes you realize that many people who end up either on the left or on whatever parts of the right aren't good, often that's the best they've heard, or they've paid a lot of attention to the other side, and this is the not other side, so that's what they go with. And once presented, yeah.
That talk was on the moral basis of capitalism, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and so it's good because I think even today, most college kids, and obviously it's best to reach the young. Most college kids aren't violent thugs, like Antifa, and those kids, Labor Party, a lot of them, belong to the college Labor Party union, like you said, Rosie. They came, they listened, they didn't yell, scream, throw garbage, riot. They asked questions, and on the way out, there was some of them were asking me, well, what Ayn Rand books would you recommend? There is hope as long as we could still speak out, as long as we're free enough to speak out. There is some possibility that we might win, even if that possibility is less than it was in the past. That was a very that was a very encouraging event. I don't think I've ever lectured to a bunch of predominantly leftist students on the moral basis of capitalism and gotten such a rational and genuinely interested response from them. That was very encouraging.
Yeah, and this is in a town called Colchester. It's about an hour and a half from where I live, where we traveled from. And Andy and I were like, Andy thought nobody would show up because it was a Friday night. I thought Antifa would show up and we might not make it back. What we ended up with was 70 polite Marxist students, first introduced to different ideas for the first time in their life, which is very good.
Very encouraging night.
Yeah. And maybe I'll push another book. This is the last one, and the title of it was given, I think, before the times we live in now. I think if it was titled today, it would be Statues That Need to Be Taken Down. But this book, can you see it? There's a problem here with the light, but it's Heroes, Legends, Champions, Why Heroism Matters by Dr. Andrew Bernstein. It's available on Amazon. If you're in London, it's also available at Ayn Rand Center UK events, which at the moment are happening online. But if you remember, you can attend them in person and get a copy. And if not, we have many of them for Andy's for Andy's 2 tours that were supposed to happen a couple of months ago and will happen once the government says it's okay.
I'll be there.
And we will be here on Monday. I don't know if we're going to be here on Saturday. We will see. If we have something good, we will be. I don't want to phone it in, but Monday we will definitely be here. It's going to be our first Facebook Live meetup, and of course, Nikos and or Raka and or Gloria and Josh are on every weekday, 6 p.m. UK time, on Facebook Live. Tomorrow they have a guest, Frank Ferretti. He's a well-known academic in the UK. The topic for that is borders. He has a new book coming out. I think it's Why Borders Matter. So hopefully Nikos will challenge him on some of that. And then the next day, Raka and Gloria have Johan Norberg on. He's a Swedish author, a fan of Ayn Rand, and that show is on the question: Is Sweden socialist? So
he wrote an interesting book in defense of global capitalism.
yeah. He's a very interesting. He has a very good documentary on YouTube as well. I recommend watching that. It's also on Sweden, which is the topic of Friday's show. So thanks everybody for joining us. Thank you, Andy. We hope to see you all here.
Pleasure, Ozzy. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, thanks, and we'll see you.
Take care, everybody. Au revoir. Bonsoir.
Bye.